Lawrence, let me know whenever you're ready to open the breakout rooms.
Please break us apart.
Lawrence, how long shall I give people to... Do you want to check if everyone's got the timer? How long shall I give everyone?
2 minutes, please.
2 minutes to get... Okay.
And just to clarify for people who are new, I've paired everybody who hasn't played before. It's the first time here virtually with someone who has played. So in the first 2 minutes, if you could throw out questions by all means.
Are we choosing the topic from the list, or will it be given?
No, the topic is evolution.
Oh, we're continuing on the evolution? Okay.
Do we need to type evolution into the timer, or are we sticking with regular?
Regular is the timer.
Good evening, May. We're just about to break out into rooms to play in pairs, or there might be one room of 3. But don't worry, we'll explain everything to you there.
Hello.
Hello there. Is it May or Mai?
May.
May. Nice to meet you.
You too. Have you played this before?
Yeah. I'm one of the sort of one of the beginning players. So yeah, it's good they paired you with me. It's good. So yeah, I'll very briefly run you through it. So basically, we're going to have a 10-minute game. There's going to be 11 minutes on the clock. If you go to, are you on a laptop? Are you on a laptop, mate?
Yes.
Yeah? If you can open up a window in a browser and go to glassbeadgames.com. And then click on the timer button. Should be a big red button that says timer on it. Yeah, you with me?
Yeah.
And then in the window there, the name of the timer is regular. Type regular into that and then click join. And you should have an inactive timer, game in 11 minutes, it should say. Is that right? Okay, great. So if you minimize that window and have it visible while we're playing, that timer will count down. It will tell you how long you have left on your turn, whose turn it is, etc. So it's going to be a 10-minute game. We get 5 one-minute turns each to speak on the topic of evolution. And the idea is that the turns build on each other, right? And we try and uncover something. So, you know, it's not about regurgitating stuff you already know. It's about exploring and discovering together. That's the sort of notion. And so we'll decide who plays first. Maybe I'll go first, seeing as this is your first game. I'll take the first turn. I'll speak for a minute, whatever ideas come to me on evolution. During the minute that I'm speaking, you sit and you listen to me. And then during your minute, you pick up on things that I've said that have triggered ideas in you. Or if nothing has triggered, you've got your own ideas and you just want to say those, you can do that. Or if nothing comes at all and you want to sit in silence, you can do that. You know what I mean? Or any combination of the above. There's no hard and fast rules. There is a sort of that we try, because this is an exploratory game, we're trying to stay out of our own ideas necessarily. We're going to miss the minute meditation. Well, like, normally the game would begin with a minute's meditation. That's just kicked off. So we have a minute and then the game's going to start. But I'm going to use up the time just to finish explaining. So we try and stay out of ego by not using personal pronouns, not using I and you. But don't, like, oh shit, if you do it, you know, you probably will, and don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. But the idea is that with practice, it becomes more natural to speak in a way that you're not coming from ego. And so, you know, it's a thing to practice, but don't worry too much about it. The main point is to be present, listen to yourself, listen to the other person, be open to, you know, radical notions that come to you. There's no judgment. There's nothing you can do or say wrong here. You know what I mean? That's what this is all about, is the freedom to explore without any kind of restriction or fear.
Sounds good.
Do you have any questions? I mean, that's fine. Just ease into my turn. Do you have any
Yeah.
questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. So, evolution. It's perhaps the single most potent story that I think mankind has come up with. It is a frame within which all of our other stories seem to sit somehow. Even our religious stories have the notion of, you know, man was the last thing that God made and therefore was the pinnacle of his achievement. Even in that, there is this notion of improvement over time, refinement and improvement over time. And yeah, so it seems to be one of the deepest notions, and yet it's quite a new one. I mean, the theory of evolution is what, 150 years, maybe 200 years old, something like that. So it's something which has profoundly seeped into our consciousness in a very short time.
Okay, thank you. And okay, I'll go, but I don't use the word I. Okay, it's hard. Someone believes. I think, you know, evolution. I think we shouldn't restrict to our human history, because I believe that there's patterns to be observed. Since we're all conscious beings, we can observe the patterns already from single-celled organisms. And before there is humanity, I think in a way the trajectory is that, you know, they're trying to understand their environment, they're trying to understand themselves. And I think really it's binary in that sense. As they're getting more information, understanding more of the environment, they integrate it, taking all the past and then create something new with what they already have. So it's this.
Yeah, it's kind of what makes the notion so powerful, in that you can apply the idea to human history, the evolution of human understanding, human scientific knowledge, you know, whatever, human culture, but you can also apply the notion to an ecosystem, you can apply the notion to an organism, you can apply the notion to a community, you can apply the notion to the whole of nature, you can apply the notion to the cosmos, you can apply the notion to consciousness. It's a holonic idea which seems to have validity across a huge, well, all scales basically. I mean, even down to, you know, even down to the idea of fundamental particles, right? That the quantum foam evolved into Bose-Einstein condensate, evolved into particles, evolved into atoms, evolved into molecules, evolved into complex molecules, evolved into carbon-based molecules, evolved into life. You know what I mean? That even at that level, it seems to work.
Yeah, exactly. So I think everything macro is really a reflection of the micro. So really, we are an expression of our building blocks. And so we express those characteristics of that, so whether it's, you know, this randomness or this desire to experience it itself through more complexity, because I think that's through more complexity, but also in terms of simplicity. So it's getting more complex, but in order to store information in an efficient way, it takes away something it doesn't think it's necessary. And as we go along, that's how it kind of just cleans up the information, looking at what's redundant. And I think in our DNA, we have all the knowledge or the experiences that we believe at the time is something we want to keep for future generations.
That's very good. The notion of evolution as a form of complexification, yeah, increasing complexity, that fits what feels absolutely right, and which is why it's such a powerful notion, right? Because the complexification of the single-celled organism into the multi-cell, this is like it's almost like a quantum leap, right? It's a phase shift. It's a different domain almost of complexity, and yeah, those are the epochal shifts in evolution, but that gradual enriching through complexity, right? That like attracts like, forms relationships. Those relationships add complexity, and that complexity creates emergent properties of something new. A new capacity emerges as a result of these complex relationships between things, and then that emergent thing becomes a thing in itself, a new evolved being or whatever, which can then enter into relationship and complexify with others.
Yeah, exactly. I think going on your trajectory, there's this period integration before it becomes the next thing. So it's plateaus at some stage, and suddenly it's a big jump. And we've seen that, you know, when we look at single cell bacteria, at first it's expanding its membrane because that's the contact with its environment. On one aspect, that's similar to, like, you know, our brain, we have a physical limitation of how much matter we can carry in it. And from that, we go to the next step. Maybe it's through communities, through internet, through a different type of technology to bypass the physical limitations we have in terms of like the building block, in terms of like matter. And then from that, you know, the cells specialize, you know, we have trillion cells in our body, but they all work together. So we have this entity as us, but really we constitute single cells working.
Yeah, and this is, again, this is the arrangement of independent units in relationship with each other to create an emergent property, and the cell is the cells in the body is a great example of that. I also really like the idea of like a leveling up and then consolidating that level, right? And so you get a period of not apparently very much going on because there's been a massive leap and that needs to be consolidated. And so at least when looking back through time, it seems as though you have long periods of stability and then some kind of upheaval and then a huge dramatic rearrangement of the matter into a whole bunch of new forms, which then, you know, form the basis of a new plateau. So very, very, very gradual increase in complexification and a sudden leap.
Yeah, I think, you know, with this looking back, we can already predict the future. The next step for humanity is really for each of us work as like a single cell in a body, that we can all work together to the single focus for the benefits of the all. So humanity working together as one. And then after that step, it will be humanity working together with all the everything that's on this planet, working together, Earth as intelligent cell. And then the next step will be for Earth to work together with all the other planets to communicate. So I think we already have a blueprint for what's next in terms of what's going to happen. And if we get there, if we don't get there, some other type of species will eventually get there, because that will be the next step as we're expanding how much we can integrate.
Yeah, this feels a little bit anthropocentric. I was thinking the same thing in the previous game, this notion that we are drivers of evolution in some way, and that it feels somewhat, you know, human arrogance to say that we are in any way control of this ancient process from which we have only just sprung in the scheme of things, right? You know, we haven't been around all that long, and yet we put ourselves in the position of being stewards of the planet and you know, directors of evolution, and this feels very dangerous. This feels like the sort of thing, there's this phrase, what's yours to do, and it feels like that's overreaching, that stuff is not ours to do, that in a way we're just along for the ride and enjoy that.
I think, you know, if you look at how many years different kind of things have been around, and I think humanity is in its infancy, it's a maturation process. I think, who knows, you know, there's intelligence in mushrooms, there's intelligence in trees, and there's intelligence in dolphins, so we're just not able to access it. Who's saying there? For things that has existed for longer than we have, they now have their type of intelligence, which is more adapted to their environments, because we obviously are not very adapted to our environment. So I think really the marker is how well adapted you're to your environment, how well adapted you're to changes. and that marks the maturity of a certain species. Well, I still have some time.
No, that's it. That's game over. Yeah, that's very. It's very interesting. I mean, I understand the point you're making about human maturation. That's fair enough. However, I still get the sense that, and I'm not putting this on you, I'm talking about people in general, humanity in general, and I include myself in this, right? I think we have a tendency to think of ourselves as, without question, the most intelligent thing on this planet, and we sort of smile fondly at the notion of mushroom intelligence or dolphin intelligence or whatever. And I personally see no reason to suppose that mushrooms connected to each other in dazzlingly complex networks underground, these mycelial networks, who is to say that their intelligence is not way beyond anything we can understand, right? We see it as this vegetable thing that we eat, but actually these things circle the globe. Every mushroom on the planet is in some way connected to every other mushroom on the planet. Who's to say this is not a giant global consciousness? Who's to say that? Just because we don't understand it, don't mean it ain't there.
Yeah, definitely the notion that it's not us, we've been enslaved by the food that we eat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. We've been enslaved by the cows and the chickens. Yeah. Or more realistically by the corn and the wheat and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Because we don't actually nobody needs wheat to survive. They don't.
In fact, it's not good for us, is it? We don't digest it well. It's not good.
Yeah, it's not even good for us. But
no.
I think we've definitely been manipulated. I'm just not really sure by what or by who.
Well, honestly, May, I've spent the last 3 or 4 years in, knowing exactly that. Yeah, I know we're being manipulated. I know the whole thing is just basically we're livestock on a farm, right? Essentially, is what the deal is here. But who the farmers are, who knows? And I think it's possibly an unanswerable question. But actually, it doesn't matter, because the problems it causes and the solutions to those problems remain the same, whoever the farmers are. And whether it's the lizard people from outer space, or whether it's the robber barons or the Bilderberg group or the whatever it is, actually the way to get out is exactly the same in every situation. So in a sense, it doesn't matter who they are.
But I was thinking, as more we give our agency to others other than outside ourselves, this is going to prolong. As long as we are looking for others to make decisions for us, then we do not have that agency. Exactly. And even if it's someone that usually they win this trust by being someone that have earned your trust, but even that is quite dangerous.
Well, in a way, yes. In your personal life, that's absolutely true. But I mean, if you're, say, voting for a political party, you probably hate all of them, right? And so you vote for the lesser of evils. But it's not, it's not a choice in the sense that I have chosen from all of the possibilities that are out there, and this is the one I really, really, really like. No, I've seen what's available, and this is the one I dislike the least. We've got to go. We're going to get kicked out. It was nice to play with you.
Close your eyes. Let the game flow through you. Let the ideas flow through you. And I'm now going to invite 3 people to try and summarize their game in 1 minute. So there's not going to be a timer you won't be able to see. I'm going to count on my phone. And when you feel like you've reached 1 minute, then just say stop. And whoever gets the closest to 1 minute shall be the winner. So are there 3 people who would like to try? So we've got Erik, Joe, anybody else? And Cristiano. Okay, Erik, could you start in 3, 2, 1, go.
So yeah, there was a couple of notions. One that particularly struck me was this idea of evolution not being a smooth and continuous process, that there are periods of great activity and then periods of apparent consolidation where, you know, when a big leap forward is then spread. You know, for example, when multicellular organisms arose, or when the eye came about, or something like that. That there's very slow progress for long periods of time, and then very sudden bursts of dramatic progress, and speculated as to what might be behind that kind of idea. What was some of the other? Oh yeah, the trade-off between progress and resources, right? The progress can only be made in the light of resources that are available to you. And after stumbling over my words so badly, I feel I've probably just about used my minute now.
1 minute and 15 seconds. Okay, Cristiano, are you ready? In 3, 2, 1, go.
Evolution can be traced on a map like a trajectory from point A to point B, but while we are in the journey, we can just look back and just predict if we are evolving afterwards. And anyway, as bias, as interpretation about if we are evolving. In the real world, in the terrain, not in the map, we suffer, we have joy, we have pleasure. So which is the feeling of evolution if you want to go out of the map? And the other thing is what happens if you take time out of evolution? So what is it? Is a feeling, is a chaos, is a... So how can we trace that one? Yeah, I think this was more or less the main point. I would end now.
57 seconds.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Okay, Joe, here we go.
Ready.
In 3, 2, 1, go.
We talked about evolution as a concept which had been invented or just thought up to describe where we came from, to try to understand a fundamental question about who we are, and how this theory provoked a very strong backlash, which was a backlash felt by the scientific community and science in general from when it first began. And the backlash was to do with the removal of the human from the center of the idea of meaning and divine creation. And we looked at how that conflict that existed between the theory of evolution coming into being and the anti-evolutionists is actually something at the heart of evolution itself. The conflict between friction and acceptance, and how that kind of leads to evolution and the next generation of something. And I've got no idea how long I've been talking for, but I'm going to leave it there.
1 minute and 16 seconds.
Oh, that was the worst.
Is there a last contender who would like to join the arena? Caroline? Yeah? Okay. Here we go. You might have to unmute your mic.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. So 3, 2, 1, go.
So we were quite rangy in our thoughts about evolution. We talked about the evolution of time and space and the evolution of human beings with animals and plants and things being a frequency, all sorts of different frequencies, and that if we could align, say, a frequency, we could actually cut through something like a table with our hand, because we could synchronize the atomic frequency. And so we talked about evolution in the sense of the greater and the meta, and the tiny and the large, and the universe within the tiny nucleus, which has no surface atom. And that's about what we talked about. It's pretty rangy back and forth, and I'll stop there.
59 seconds.
Oh,
And I see,
Amazing.
I see that you've got your hand raised. Would you like to have a go?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
It
this
was
is getting competitive.
Yeah. So I have 1 second to. Oh my god, it's so stressful. When can I start?
I'll count you down. You ready?
Yes.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1, go.
We talked about evolution and repetition, and in the way that evolution is, and repetition is actually evolution. And from the idea of repetition being evolution, we moved on to the ways that we can resist evolution, and the limits to our resistance, and the actions that we can take against evolution. And we got to a point that all we can do is either surrender to evolution or assemble to evolution. And in assembly, there is also evolution. So we cannot stop it. And I think that's it.
1 minute and 6 seconds. So we have a winner, Caroline. Congratulations. So we're now going to play another game.
Okay.
We're going to mix it up a bit. We're going to play 4 players this time, and we're going to play 30-second turns. So it's going to have a little bit more of a tempo to it. And what we're going to do is we're going to choose from the different topics from the other 9 topics. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and you're going to see all the topics. Here we go. So we have participation, curiosity and reflection, gifting and sharing, playful creativity, collaboration, leave a better trace, consent, self-reliance, and responsibility. If you could write into the chat the topic that you would like to play on, and if you could write in an alternative as well, so it makes it easier for us to pair everybody together, then we shall do our best to satisfy everybody.
Okay, it's a bit hard with the chat. Okay.
You'll need to be patient with me to set up the breakout rooms, but I will do it as quickly as I can. Lawrence, there were going to be a couple of groups of 2 and 3. Are you happy for me to put people in 2 and 3 according to the choices they've made, rather than put them into something they didn't want to play?
I think that might be difficult for the timer. Jane, could you comment on that?
We're 17, so there has to be either a 5 or a 2 and a 3.
I think a 5 is better. If we have 1 5, then. Or otherwise, I'm happy to stay out, and if that makes things easier.
No, I'm looking at the list. If anyone can give me intelligent solutions to how to make 4s out of these choices, the only one that I can find is...
Alina, how about just assign us randomly and we can negotiate in our rooms what topic we do. Give us a couple of minutes before you kick us off and we can negotiate in each room what topic we want to do. I'm sure we can do that. I'm sure we can manage that between us.
Good idea.
Yeah,
Lawrence,
if you try and pair people, if you try and bring people together around common interests, and then they can negotiate exactly what they want to play on. And I haven't written one in. I really don't mind what we play on.
Yeah, I don't really mind that much either. I picked 2, but I don't really care. That's what I'm saying. I'm sure we can figure it out in the rooms. It won't be a problem.
Sorry, I'm getting, I'm just going to...
Just do it random. Just do 4 rooms at random, Alina.
There's just too much information in the chat for it to be easy to kind of...
Yeah, no, I completely understand. It's a fucking nightmare. No, absolutely. Just do 4 rooms at random.
Take your time.
Sorry, Lawrence, would you rather I take 5 minutes to do this, or should I do people randomly?
Just do people randomly and then let them negotiate. An exercise in negotiation that we're doing. That'll also evolve our minds.
Yeah, put me in a room with Cristiano.
Ideally, we could all just be able to click on the little icons and it would just take us blip, blip, blip into the room that we want. That would be
Right,
amazing.
the next time, if you want to do something like that, Lawrence, I'll set up rooms and with the titles and make everybody co-host, and they can actually choose their own rooms, because otherwise, and that would be a way of kind of working around it for the next time, but we'll tweak, so.
We could also change our names next time and add them in the names. Maybe then it's easier.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, May.
Hi, May.
Hi, good to see you.
Hi, Erik. Good to see you too.
Yeah, May and I are old friends.
Same here. And Joe and I are new friends from last time.
So what was that topic, or was it anything goes?
Yeah, we can pick from that list. I mean, I think we've all made our choices. As I've already said, I don't really care that much. The ones I picked were self-reliance and openness and curiosity, or something like that.
Yeah, I picked self-reliance and participation.
I picked responsibility.
I chose consent and gifting and sharing.
I'm up for anything. I'll just step out of the decision.
Yeah, no, listen, likewise. I mean, likewise. The one that jumped out to me first, and the only one that we've heard twice, was self-reliance. That was
okay. Well, should we play on 2, or do we have to choose one? I suppose we should just choose one, shouldn't we? Okay.
Yeah, with 4 players, I think 2 beads with 4 players might be possibly a bit too many.
Okay.
Because there's going to be 3 turns before your turn anyway, so you're already going to have difficulty holding on to. So yeah, I think.
So yeah, let's do self-reliance. Was that, sorry, is that what we decided? Yeah.
What's the timer called, by the way? Does anyone know? I didn't ask. I don't think it was said, but maybe I missed it.
Will it be regular again? Aren't they just updating?
30-second turn, so it won't be regular. It's 30-second turn.
Well, then they didn't give us the time.
I don't think they told us the timer name. Hang on, let me send a text via Signal and ask.
We can message everyone.
Yeah, we can message the glass bead game, right? And someone should pick it up.
I think everyone's just
We just
asking.
got it. It's 4.
What's it called?
4.
What? The number or the word?
The number, but in letters.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I meant. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Great. And would someone like to decide an order?
Order on my screen is Niels, me, Joe, May. That's the order on my screen.
Same here.
Cool.
So should we do that?
Perfect.
Good a randomizer as any.
Yeah. That means I'm first and then Joe.
No, you're first, then me, then Joe, then May.
Okay. At least I'm first. That's all I.
You're first, yeah, and you're after May. That's the other thing to remember: is you're after May and you're first. That's all.
Yeah.
Self-reliance. There we go.
Thank you, Erik.
And so self-reliance, 30-second turns. Timer is still inactive.
Yeah.
All right, good. That felt, I don't know, that felt a little frantic for some reason, but it wasn't frantic at all. They've given us plenty of time, so it wasn't at all frantic.
I think it went fairly smooth.
Hmm.
Everybody's stepping out of the way, basically.
Yeah, we don't often play 4s. Good, I like it. I like it with more players.
The more the merrier.
Well, yes. It's harder. It's harder. In many ways, it's harder with 4. You'll see. You'll see. In many ways, it's harder with 4.
Meditation.
Okay, meditation is on. Self-reliance, the act of relying on oneself, which entails both understanding what one needs and then acting upon those needs to secure that one has what one truly needs. It's a deep, potentially spiritual practice.
Yeah, self-reliance really has to be conceived of in the realm of the psychological, philosophical, because the notion of self-reliance in the world is absurd, right? The notion of relying on oneself and not needing trees and water and plants and other animals and nuts and fruits and all of that kind of thing, it is absurd. And so self-reliance is a state of mind, right? It's not an actual thing. It can't be done in a literal sense.
Self-reliance versus independence. So self-reliance is the psychological state of mind which is beneficial to the self in its spiritual economy. Independence is a concrete reality that someone will kid themselves, delude themselves that they are existing in.
I think self-reliance will be increasingly more difficult as we evolve, coming on from the last topic. I think we need to develop better communication with each other, better ways of collaborating with each other, as well as so like specialization. If we're looking at how sales has developed, that it has just become very, very good at being that one particular sales. So we need to, one, be very good at being ourselves.
Self-reliance is increasingly challenging in this day and age, while at the same time increasingly important, because of the fact that the idea of independence is not valid, though self-reliance allows us and forces us to step out of the comfort of the system that we're in. The system should not feel comfortable.
So self-reliance, independence. The other word that comes to mind that's linked to this is responsibility. And independence, independent from a particular thing. Independent as in no man is an island, right? Independent, you cannot stand alone, but you can be independent from, for example, stepping outside of the system. So the self-reliance is the taking on the responsibility to be independent from something you no longer wish to be attending to.
So, if one is self-reliant, they are able to remove themselves from the systems which they are able to remove themselves from, or which it is possible to remove oneself from. That is a beneficial goal, to have the choice to opt in or opt out of these optional systems which many people do not know are optional.
I believe self-reliance, the people, when we look at our own personal journey, the ones that really want that the most is probably the teenage years, these teenage rebellions, because they don't trust whether or not they are capable of doing it themselves. Therefore, it's like there's a drive for them to try to achieve that. I'm thinking in a way that now we want self-reliance because we don't have it. Ultimately, the goal is to come to a stage where we don't need it.
So individuation is that aspect of self, and so that's a crucial part of self-reliance, is to, because there is no self on which to rely until one has properly individuated that self, right? And so, yeah, it's a far more interesting and subtle and connected to other things notion than is at first apparent. There's a quiet fortitude that's.
I'll go instead of you, Joe. Self-reliance connected to the teenage years and connected to the question of, do we want it or not? Do we need it or not? In this current day and age, perhaps self-reliance is also stepping out not only of the systems we think of when we say systems, but also the system of victimization. Self-reliance is looking at oneself as not a victim, but simply a part of the whole with responsibility.
Self-reliance, stepping outside of the binary of perpetrator or victim. So self-reliance is accepting responsibility. A teenager desires self-reliance in an immature way because they're seeking independence from systems which nurtured them, perhaps. Perhaps it's not always immature.
I believe most of us, 99.9% of us, are now self-reliant because our interaction with our environment is through the air we breathe and through the food we intake. And people are not concerned enough about the air we breathe. And most people, I would say, apart from the Bushmen, we can't even tell, 50 names for different types of plants, but we can easily say 100 names of different brands or companies. So we are pay more attention to. Okay.
We cannot be self-reliant without there. We have to understand that it is part of us. And in self-reliance maybe also lies that insight that me being self-reliant is me functioning with the entire ecosystem that I am a part of, the entire ecosystem that I am, playing my part in that ecosystem so that I survive because the ecosystem survives. Maybe that is the definition of self-reliance we need in this day and age.
Yeah, the word sovereignty is now coming to mind, that this is the knowing what you can and what is and is not yours to do, and when it is yours to do, doing it, and when it's not yours to do, letting go of the desire to change that thing which you cannot change or is not yours to change. That, so having the capacity to rely on yourself when you need to, but also to know when to rely on others, right?
self-reliance is a skill that can be taught as a methodology or even a philosophy. So how can we make sure that younger generations are taught self-reliance? Is it something which we teach with theory, or is it mainly through practice?
Recently, I was thinking a lot about my grandparents, and who were born almost 100 years ago. Was not didn't go illiterate, but can make their own clothes, can cook the food, and those can take care of many children, and went on to be really successful. So I think in terms of self-reliant, depends on what do we want. If we don't even know what are we focusing on, is it degrees, is it a certain ability, what do we focus on?
Self-reliance, perhaps bringing the knowledge of the past, combining it with the knowledge of the present, understanding which parts of these knowledge is needed for one to survive, for one to thrive, both as an individual and as part of a collective, as part of a greater whole, honoring the past and honoring the future.
Yeah, self-reliance, there's a personal power thing also involved in self-reliance. If you do not require others to fill your needs, that gives you a certain amount of freedom to act. It takes off the shackles, right? So, and this feels, and it's not quite self-reliance anymore, but it all feels very, very related.
Yeah, that relationship between independence, dependence, and self-reliance is coming back, isn't it? Self-reliance seems to be something which exists in and of itself. Self-reliant is self-reliant. Whereas when you describe being independent, you must describe what you are independent from or of, and likewise with dependent.
I would almost argue that we might not want to be self-reliant at all, because the more we care about others, if they are a part of us, we can make sure that the interactions is necessary. But if we don't have needs of others, then we might not always choose to take care of others, and that in turn might actually cause us not to be where we want.
Can I offer a small synthesis
Thanks,
here, which has just come to me during May's turn there. The idea that it's as we said at the very beginning, it's like a state of mind, right? And it's as you said, it's a thing in itself, right? It's a thing in itself that you carry around with you. It's a form of inner confidence almost, right? And you can cultivate that sense of being self-reliant through things like self-defense, knowledge of food, how to look at, the practicalities of survival, I don't know, forest survival training. This kind of thing would cultivate just a general sense of self-reliance. But yeah, it's an inner state. It is that it's a thing in itself, like you said. That's what triggered it. It's a thing in itself.
I like that. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for this game. Amazing.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
You played before, Niels?
This is my third round now. My last video was my second.
Oh, yeah, no, but before today. Before today, you haven't played.
This Sunday, I played once with Lawrence.
Right, okay.
They got me up to speed on it.
And May, have you played before?
This is my second time. I played my first one with Erik.
That's why I said we were old friends, because we just played a game before this one. So.
I see.
It was somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but then I guess you couldn't have known that. I guess it was just a little joke between me and May. You should not have known that.
Well, now we know.
Yeah.
See you back there, guys.
Yeah.
Back there. Thank you.
I have to make a quick apology that I didn't make note of the first pairs. If you could just quickly in the chat let me know who you were with, so that I can try and avoid setting up or similar groups in the first one, because I did take a note of this last one. Thank you.
Oh, and apologies to people in my game for going out of turn. I do apologise. We recovered perfectly from it, but nevertheless, my apologies.
It's all part of the experience. Thank you, Erik.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope that you had an enjoyable game.
For sure.
We're just going to take 30 seconds to recenter. Just let the game settle a bit. And we're going to play another game of On the Dot. This time we're going to see. This time we're going to see who can express the most interesting idea of their game, just one, in 30 seconds. So if anybody would like to play, then please raise your hand, either physically or digitally. Ka? Jen?
Yeah,
Alina?
been waiting for you.
Anyone else?
I'm happy to go again to make up numbers, but I'm in not in any desperate need to go.
Then in that case, we shall begin with Ka. Are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1, go.
We were not able to agree on one topic, so we played a meta game on the world of wisdom, and we played it to the edges and to the rims and to the fringes, and we found spirituality not being really addressed, and substance and earth and resources not being really addressed, and the last one I forgot, and that's probably 30 seconds. Bam.
26 seconds. Okay, Jen, are you ready?
I guess so. I'm scared.
Here we go. 3,
I was too.
2, 1, go.
So we played on the notion of responsibility, and we really struggled our way through with the meaning and the weight of responsibility, about passing it, picking it up, taking it on, having it imposed, and all those sort of things. But as we played through, we started to pull them apart, and we started to realize there was only one actual real responsibility, and that was responsibility to yourself and your own agency, and that was the core of responsibility, and all else perhaps was ephemeral. Finish.
36 seconds. Very close. Very close. Alina, are you ready?
Not really, but let's go.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1, go.
Curiosity is what drew our curiosity, and we talked about curiosity as a boundless metaphor, a smell, a falling, a jumping. A wonderful metaphor came out, which was forgetting the water had once been frozen so that we could jump once again. The shines of childhood dragged us between the past and the present, and to capture our curiosity as a long-lasting entity that stays with us.
32 seconds.
Ooh.
And the winner is Alina. Well done. Okay, would anybody like a go before we move on? Then move on we shall. So we're going to play one last game tonight. and we're going to go a little bit deeper this time. We're going to play in pairs again, and we're going to play 2-minute turns. So you'll see there's a little bit more space for depth. There's a little bit more space for silence as well. Play with silence. And what we're going to play on is we're going to play on a wise world. What would a wise world look like? How do we get to a wise world? So the timer is called 2, TWO. And Alina, when you're ready, then break us away.
Erik.
That's funny. I thought I was with Wasim. It was me and Wasim next to each other, and then it broke up and then came back to you. It's weird. Weird.
Strange. Oh, you actually went into another room?
No, I hadn't. Well, no, I was getting the timer up, and I just came back into Zoom, and there was all that was me and Wasim next to each other, but also
maybe
was
you were
that
the last
window
ones
to click
to...
on breakout room. So I clicked on that, expecting the window to just go away, that it had already moved me to the breakout room. But then it moved me to a breakout room with you. So maybe we were just the last two left in the other room, maybe.
Yeah.
So we're playing on a wise world, and it's 2-minute turns, is it?
Yeah. Presentation's actually started already.
Oh, it has. Sorry, I didn't realise. Do you want to go first or second?
I'll go first. A wise world. What does a wise world look like? A wise world looks like the blue dot photograph from Voyager as it exits the cosmos. A wise world is a world which sees itself as part of a system that is greater than itself. It's a world which understands its place in a system. The system must be flexible enough for mistakes in the conception of that system to be not ruinous to the order. That is to say that the system that the wise world knows itself to be a part of should be one which is upgradable, capable of evolving and being flexible to new ideas and new conceptions of what this system might look like. So a wise world is one which has awareness of itself within a system and a developed knowledge of that system which is flexible enough for it to change and absorb new information, new ideas when that happens.
The notion of understanding the place in the whole is I think among this group of people sort of clear to the point of being almost self-evident, right? But what's what's interesting to me, and sorry for the personal pronoun thing, but what's interesting to me is embedded in the phraseology of the question is an homage to the staggering proportions of human arrogance, right? That a wise world is us being wise, right? Yeah, that somehow we equate ourselves with being the world, right? And the astounding self-importance that is built into our language in so many ways, you know, stewards of the planet, directors of evolution, the universe's eyes on itself, all of this kind of stuff, the special place that we hold for ourselves, which is maybe done in the minds of all species. Maybe all species see themselves as the only actual thing in the world and everything else is just background, right? Everything else is just setting. But yeah, so a wise world would seem to begin with a deep humility that we are born of the world. We are not masters of it. We are not separate from it. We are not immune to its constraints and its laws. We are born of it. And that wisdom begins with an embodied understanding of that.
So a wise world would have a, well, would it necessarily need to be a global culture which has that humility at its core? The humility of realizing the arrogance and ridiculousness of anthropocentric systems. So would we need to have a world culture which might have its variations depending on nations and continents and what have you, but would at least have that principle at its core, that there must be this humility, this respect for the system that bore us, that we came from, and that we're not masters of. So if that's the case, if we need to have that culture in place, then a wise world is not the world that we live in today. Which may be an obvious thing to say. But in what way could we see ourselves on the path towards that kind of culture or that kind of society? Is it a linear thing? Can we say that, yeah, we're more or less heading in that direction? Or can we say the opposite? Are we heading in the opposite direction? Or is it more complicated than that? Are there millions of different strands of this kind of culture sending themselves out in various different directions, and some of them are going in this wise world direction?
In my haste to grab a pen, I grabbed a Sharpie, and the smell is making me high, so I apologize if I'm a bit. So there's a few things to pick up on here. Firstly, do we need to have a global system that has as one of its principles, or as its abiding principle, this? It's not a principle. I mean, the systems that we build would need to reflect our understanding of that, but it's not. But it can't be. It can't be codified as a principle. It is something which an individual understands because they feel it, or or they don't. But this leads to another very interesting thing, because you can't expect everybody to have the same embodied experience as you, right? So that's an absurd expectation. And so you then get down to this. I've written down "fake it till you make it," and so you do have it as principles, even enforced principles, until it becomes lived experience and the value of it is understood in an embodied sense. And then you no longer need the rules anymore, because people get it, everyone gets it at an individual level. But until everyone gets it at an individual level. Yeah, there's another thing here. This must we have, and as soon as there's a must into it, that feels, no, that can't be the right way. As soon as there's a must, then that feels wrong. It's must not have musts. So yeah, so yeah, things that, again, I like the more of this and less of this, right? A directionality rather than a okay, everybody gets it now. Now we're all on the same page, but just more in that direction and less in that direction, something like that.
And that kind of thinking seems to be at the heart of a lot of the culture wars and the issues that surround it, and the issues, or the pool from which that kind of conflict has sprung, doesn't it? There seems to be this penchant for enforcing and for musts and banning, which does not work. And it seems to be that one of the main reasons for that not working is that idea of something must be felt and lived in order for it to be properly understood. It's a little bit like where the word understand comes from. To stand underneath something, the person needs to be physically there, physically and emotionally there. Their organism needs to be feeling and living that experience. Otherwise, well, not otherwise, but aside from that lived experience, all there is words and dogma, and all of those are leading up to, they're trying to get people to have those lived experiences. But you can't, like you said, the thing we can't do is there must not be musts, because the musts will always provoke the opposite reaction. So will it be a slow process then? Must it be a slow process of slowly introducing these ideas and showing people how they work? And is there going to be enough time?
Yeah, I love the reminder about this understand notion, standing under, being present, and being, it's a kind of submission, right? You're standing under, you are being humble too, you are putting yourself below this thing. In order to understand it, you have to get yourself, you have to make yourself less important than that thing in order to stand underneath it. So that there's humility involved in understanding, and there is humility involved also, it seems, in the acquisition of wisdom. In order to acquire wisdom, you first have to shed your arrogance, right? Shed your certainties about things in order to be wise. If you're not already wise, if you wish to become wise, well, you need to let go of what you think you already know, because you're not wise, and while you hang on to that shit, you're going to remain not wise. And so that seems to be a really, really important thing, the getting back to the appreciation, and also that musts provoke, that as soon as you march against something, you're strengthening the for side of it as well. Yeah, as soon as you push against something, it must push back at you. So yes, absolutely must provoke. And the must it be slow? Very good, by the way. Must it be slow? Well, slow is a relative notion, isn't it? I mean, slow as compared to what? So that idea of more of this and less of this on an ongoing basis, slow or fast, I guess really doesn't matter. The desire to acquire wisdom seems to me to be an individual thing, and then when enough individuals have that, it becomes a collective endeavor, right? Something like that. But until then, it rests in the hands of the individual.
Yeah, I like the idea of the collective endeavor. And perhaps it needs to be a collective endeavor because of the likely length of time it will take to create this kind of change, to have that kind of change germinate and spread around the world. So there's the possibility that this idea of must and banning and prohibition is almost like a shortcut to the desired goal. And so, like with wisdom, the shortcuts don't work. There is the time it takes, and that is the time it will take. There's no way around it. Which sounds sort of annoyingly trite and twee and sort of aphoristic and in a pretentious way, that it will take the time it takes. But I don't. That's not how it's meant. It's meant in this idea that time, that slow or fast, it doesn't matter. So therefore our jobs, our tasks, if we're looking to live meaningfully and to promote a wise world, which we are, our job is to seed the wisdom where we can and in the ways that we can within our power, to not to add fuel to the fire of the must not conflict, and to do something else which I've forgotten.
No, that was good, because I have greater clarity now on why the time thing is a red herring. Because time taken to what? What is the end point? When do we stop the stopwatch? Right? There is no we are now wise. Yeah, there is no point. We are never living in a wise world. The best we can ever hope for is to be living in a wiser world than we were living in yesterday, right? And that we are oriented in the direction of increasing wisdom. And that we never, ever, ever, I hope, God, please never get to the point, we have attained wisdom. That's it. We're there. We've done it, right? And so that's why the time thing is a red herring, because there is no point at which you stop the stopwatch. And so fast or slow is irrelevant, right? It's a never-ending journey, hopefully in a direction of increasing wisdom, whatever the hell that even means. I mean, what it means to be wise, that notion will almost certainly, I cannot imagine it not changing. I mean, I guess there are certain enduring traits in characters that we associate with wisdom. But wisdom, this is interesting as well, it's just come to me. Wisdom, we don't think of wisdom as being a collectively held thing, right? Wisdom resides in Christ. Wisdom resides in the Buddha. Wisdom resides in Lao Tzu, right? There are wisdom. People speak nuggets of wisdom. Millions and millions of them speak nuggets of wisdom. But and so there's this thing that we all know is there, right? And yeah, we can't define what it is. We want more of it. We want to head in the direction of it. And yet our ability to deceive ourselves often makes us move away from it when we think we're moving towards it. That was a bit of a ramble, sorry.
No. The enduring traits of wisdom is a really interesting question, and how it does seem historically to have resided in individuals. There's a way in which when I think of wisdom, there's an idea of there's a contrast between a sort of calmness and acceptance and deliberate action, which doesn't seem rushed or hurried or constrained by fears or anxieties. There's an equanimity to the wise, which might seem almost timeless, as if to continue this idea of wisdom being outside time, wisdom being an orientation rather than a goal. They seem to be pointed in facing that direction with that wise sun on their faces. But can we think of societies which have been wise? I guess there's an idea of we can think of the indigenous societies as wise in their ecological foresight, in their ideas of time as cyclical rather than chronological and sort of tying us to progress. That's what I've got.
I'm now wondering whether this notion of wise isn't itself a red herring, right? This, because I like the idea of indigenous tribes, but they are not wise. They had wisdom, right? And so this is because they weren't wise, really, not in the fullest sense of the word, because they got beaten up and shot and infected with diseases by invaders, right? And are no longer around. They've been completely obliterated, all but completely obliterated. So they weren't that fucking wise, were they? So, you know, there's you know, this is what I mean. There is no destination here. There is no being wise, right? It's an endlessly unfolding terrain that, and it seems like this is linked to the arrogance notion we were talking about at the beginning, right? That as soon as you think you are wise, you have been seduced by your own arrogance and your self-importance, and you have actually lost whatever wisdom you might have had before you thought you were wise. You know what I mean? There's something like that. The arrogance is maybe arrogance makes wisdom opaque, something like, because that was absolutely true what you said before. There's a equanimity and a calmness and a forbearance and a acceptance of what is that goes along with those that we think of as wise. But yeah, I mean, the idea of the Egyptian empire being wise is absurd, but a particular pharaoh being wise or having wisdom, that seems far less absurd. There are even people who are called whatever, Reg the Wise, you know, things like that. So yeah, but I like, I know used I an awful lot here, but it seems more appropriate in a 2-minute game. I don't know why. Yeah, but wise is a red herring. It's a trap. It's a seductive trap. Oh, game complete.
Oh, I thought we were going on for much longer.
I think we have gone on for much longer. It just didn't feel like much longer.
Well, that was 21 minutes.
Apparently so. I mean, it does say game complete, so I could only assume that, yeah, that was 21 minutes.
I had so much more to say. That was such a fascinating, that was really fascinating, Erik. Thank you so much.
No, Claire, likewise,
really cool.
likewise.
Like what you were saying about, it's a really provocative question as well. You know, were those indigenous societies wise because they got destroyed? You know, so I've got questions here like, can ignorance destroy wisdom? Are you wise? Are we wise if we are destroyed by ignorance? Is there a way in which, because it's actually a problem which the Western world and democracies have faced, isn't it? How do we protect against savagery like Islamic State whilst maintaining our wise freedoms?
Well, firstly, by letting go of the notion that we are in any way wise, right? And
yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? That does seem to be at the heart of the some kind of struggle within our societies, right?
Well, I do you know what, the way around that one is through it, right? By becoming more compassionate, more humane, more generous, and sorting out the lives of the people whose countries we have destroyed over the last few decades, right? Actually going in there and just doing it, and not saddling them with loans for it, just doing it. Do you know what? We are really fucking sorry. This was bad. We have fucked up the lives of millions of your people. We are going to do everything we can to put you back on your feet. Yeah, just tell us what you want and we will do it. There we go. That's a pathway back to wisdom. But there's no fucking way that's ever happening, right?
No, it doesn't seem like it, because that's not why those wars were started, was it?
And that's the end of Islamic State right there. If America did that, like actually did that, you know, humbly and genuinely did that, Islamic State's gone. Because these people are not actually religious nuts, most of them, right? They are poor, desperate people who belong to nothing, have got nothing going on in their lives. And they can be, you know, they can be heroes. They can be heroes to their communities. And their lives are not worth living anyway, right? So to go and blow yourself up in an American embassy seems like a pretty good deal, knowing that your family is going to get taken care of, good food, nice place to live, blah, 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 blah. You know, there's a lot of attraction to that. And it's got very, very, very little to do with Islam. I'm not saying nothing, but very little to do with Islam.
No,
I'm
completely. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Let's see what everyone was playing on that, so there should be some good discussion.
There should. Right. Oh, yeah, we're being called back. Yeah, always end up being late.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your game. We're going to take another short minute just to let the game settle. And I would like to dissolve my role as the Magister Ludi. Thank you all for coming to play.
Thank you. Thank you, Summer. It was a great session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We leave the room open if anybody wants to stick around. But if not, then thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Bye. If we don't have your email address, folks, just pop it in the chat so we can invite you again, tell you about your games.
Jen, I think you have mine, don't you? I mean, you always
got yours, Caroline. No, Caroline, your email bounced, my dear. I think would you put what the one I've got for you? So put the one you use now in.
It's the same one.
Oh.
Try again. I'll do it again.
Yeah.
Jane.
Perhaps I misspelled it or something.
Okay. Hang on.
Okay, Cristiano. I'll check on that.
I think Caroline's an MI5 agent, personally.
I'm infiltrator. Wait a minute, where's the chat box? Oh God.
Erik, we agreed on disclosure. What are you doing?
Here we go.
What was that, Carl? So those who haven't been before, we often sit and chat forever. So, and it's nice to, I mean, World of Wisdom, wow. Niels, we really had a wonderful, wonderful game, didn't we?
Yeah, that was spectacular.
It was super, super good. It's hard to almost report on it though.
Well,
did you go to positive space, or was it a bit negative, or what was the valence that?
It was fairly holistic.
Yeah, it wasn't wholly positive, but it was pretty accepting, I think. What was really, really key in our discussion was that fluidity was key to wisdom, and the the discovery of our ignorance is the greatest gift we have, and that rigidity and brittleness were the enemy to wisdom, both personally and socially.
Funny that you picked up on arrogance, because the very first thing I said was, at the very framing of the question, it reeks of arrogance, right? Wise world, like us people, like, you know, because we're only talking about, we're talking about the wisdom of human society, right? And it's framed as a wise world, as though we somehow rule the world, are masters of the world, yeah, are saviors of the world, all of this kind of thing. So the language itself is absolutely reeking of human arrogance.
We didn't understand it as something that's very specific to humans and human arrogance. We got to the point where we agreed that there might be more than one wisdom and more than one wise word, and they're not only for one specific species and one specific place and one specific time, but there are wisdoms that can change through space and time. And somehow we moved from that to morality as a way to choose between the different options available.
Yeah, we were just getting into it, weren't we?
Yeah.
Wasim. But we're just touching on morality and rationality and how important they are, and whether there are traps there or not. Yeah, I think if we'd have had another turn, I think we'd have got deeper in.
Yeah, our last turn was interrupted by Alexa.
Oh yeah.
The source of all wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah, she told me that it's time for me to go to bed. She wanted to play music for me and set up an alarm.
Technology is our parent.
We kept getting caught up in this kind of the cracks between different types of wisdom. So this idea of kind of human exceptionalism makes us feel that our wisdom is the world, but then we obviously have glimpses into other forms of wisdom, but how do we actually see them? And so this idea of collective wisdom came up, and how we understand and navigate that and see it even. And the projection of our intelligence into the universe included mathematics. And so actually, in our hubris of saying, look, aren't we intelligent, and we're going to throw this out, even though you'll be receiving our crappy TV before you even ever see this, had the element of mathematics built into it. So we saw a glimpse of this collective intelligence that could be beyond even a limited species, but we kept bashing against the edges of those limitations, and just not understanding how human beings can actually kind of navigate those cracks.
Just weird. So I have the feeling that we really had, like, how do you say that? We had a razor sharp knife cutting everything from that wisdom thing in the very beginning, like Rolanda's first turn was like, shoop! And then we knew from the very beginning that in order to perceive wisdom, or in order that there is wisdom, there needs to be something that's not wise. And in order to have a wise world, it needs to concern the whole world. So it's about the whole, and it's also about that is not wise. That was like Rolanda's first turn, and it was like, okay, that's the play field where we're at. And then while playing, we understood that actually it's probably only the humans that do unwise actions, because it seems to be connected to us being able to perceive at all and to observe at all. And then we kind of even questioned whether the term wisdom makes sense at all in a world that is not observed by observers with a consciousness. And when we let that go, we understood that that it's a human capacity to evaluate a space in time, in evolving time. The longer the time span evolves, the more we can evaluate. Like the older you get, the wiser you get, or the more you perceive it. Even our conversation had an evolution where it became wiser from compared from the moment where it started. And that and bringing in the world perspective was adding the perspective of all the other beings, may they be alive or not alive. And that's where we did not clash at any border, but the question whether the term itself was a wise term. But then we just went with it and understood that it needs to be there, and that probably it's inevitable that it's there, because we are humans, and and it seems that part of us have lost the connection to the whole and are therefore like the example of the unwise actions. And that's probably us that we're talking here right at the moment. It's not the Aborigines in deep time that probably do not have a concept of wisdom or something like that.
Like we talked about wise action and unwise actions, but in the link with risk, because every action that we make have a higher probability of making us move farther from the wisest word possible, because there is only one wisest word possible and a lot of actions. So it's very likely that we're going to move away from it and not towards it. And then from this idea of risk in taking an action, we ask if the wisest action is inaction.
I've got two questions to put to the group just very quickly. Firstly, where's the difference between wisdom and judgment? And secondly, does greater data, like age comes with wisdom, does greater data mean more wisdom necessarily? Or even does it? Is it even necessarily linked? I'm very curious about this because it seems that there's a good deal of conflation between wisdom and judgment going on in this discussion.
It came up in our game, and I don't know, I feel like there's some overlap. I think there is something about evaluation and if you're going to be changing your action in real time, right? Which is, if there are multiple wisdoms, there are multiple options, there are multiple ways forward or backwards or staying still. One of those is going to be the best way, and with multitudes of other better but not best but better, and a bunch that are going to make it worse. So that there has to be some kind of link with input, like just raw data. But there's also a really, really vital piece, which is, well, you've got to be able to do something with that data. Like just having the data, well, that's chances are you'll just be overwhelmed. Anything will be overwhelmed by the amount of universe that's not it. So just having access to all of the information in the universe is not sufficient, but it's a piece. So I think in order to stay dynamic and be dynamic in an effective way, we do need access to data. So there's a link, but it's not a complete conflation. It's not, there are other pieces.
Do you all know this? I won't waste your time telling it to you if most of you already know it, but I think it fits really nicely here. Do you know that Chinese story of, the farmer who horse runs away one night and all of his neighbors come around and say, oh, what a horrible thing to happen to you. I see Rolandus nodding. Do the rest of you know
I'm not
this?
familiar.
If not,
No.
it's only 30 seconds. It's worth, okay. But it seems to me that, you know, let's say the farmer had, after the horse ran away, gone out the next morning and bought a new horse, right? You know, he would have made I need a horse, right? I'm going to die if I don't have a horse to pull my plow. I need a horse, goes and buys it. And then another horse would have come back the next day. And so he's made a bad call. Was it unwise? It was bad judgment. Was it unwise? And so it seems to me the point of this story is that wisdom is the knowledge that you never know which of your actions are good or bad. What happens to you in life? What is good or bad? Yeah, wisdom is the knowledge that you never know any of that. And then judgment is, even though I know I don't know, I'm still going to make a judgment call here, right? So judgment is, I don't know. I'm unclear on this, but wisdom seems to me to be a state of being, right, where you are not making these kinds of value judgments. Whereas in order to take an action, you must make a value judgment. Right. Sorry, Niels, you wanted to talk.
Niels, we all butt in here. So, well, we don't. We try and give each other space, but we do just step in and talk. So go ahead.
It's me being the polite Swede.
No, stop being polite.
So in our conversation, we spoke about this, about how we as humans, we strive for wisdom. We strive for understanding things, while wisdom is knowing that we will never have it. We have never found any wisdom that lasts. We've always thought that we were right about things and previous generations were wrong about things. And we never see what we're wrong about. And then we continue this journey as a consciousness, and we understand that, oh, we were wrong again, and we were wrong again, and we're forever wrong. There's no such thing as wisdom in that sense. The only wisdom is the wisdom of knowing that we will never have wisdom. We are not right. That is the only wisdom.
Yeah.
Even though we still have to strive for it. That's what's driving everything. We're constantly looking for answers. We're trying to figuring it out. We're trying to understand it all. And that's sort of what's driving existence, right? Like we continue. That's what's driving us to action. If we didn't have that curiosity or need to understand or figuring out or trying to convince each other of an infinite number of opinions, trying to find one opinion that is right, we would not do anything. Nothing would ever happen. Nothing would ever change. Consciousness is trying to understand itself, and it never will. That's sort of.
We kept coming up. Oh, sorry, go on.
Rolandus was
to give that like an added perspective of the word itself being problematic and not really helping us to understand each other. We definitely need more words to that, because different authors might refer to it differently, but I think one way of dealing with that is to just minimize wisdom to one thing that we could be sure about it, like one property. And it would be maybe similarly with the term of discernment, like it gives an edge where we're like on the edge and we're choosing one way or the other. So whatever the outcome of that choice will be, that is unknown, but at least we are in the position where we're capable of making a distinction and making a judgment one way or the other. So it's a form of power of choice. And in the prayer for serenity prayer, there's an example of that being that give me the serenity to accept things that I cannot change and the courage to change to do the things that I can change, and the wisdom to know the difference. So at least I can in some moment decide whether this particular situation is about accepting serenely or is courageously trotting along. And if we have that as a definition, maybe we can at least move one step forward. And when we had our call, we also had an issue with time. And when the timer stopped, there was a sudden realization that there was more to share. And there was a time where I was supposed to say, and I was about to say things, and there was a wisdom in Ka saying, well, continue. And then I continued, and then Ka made a response. So we had an extra turn, even if it was shorter, but we needed it, and we made it. And it was wise for us in that moment We did not plan that. We did not expect that. So it was in that moment a possibility to choose better for us, even if we've screwed up something later.
I think what you've said, Rolandus, and what Erik said, and it's kind of coming up, it's all about this notion of choosing. This is the wonderful thing about our consciousness, because all the data in the world doesn't, you can't have it all, you can't compute it all. Playing a chess game, you can't possibly compute all the moves. We're able as humans, our consciousness is able to find what's relevant and make those balancing choices, those I don't know what Erik called it, discernment, or was it, or perhaps but there's something that the human consciousness is doing that's magical, and it's somehow tied up with wisdom. It also makes us fucking stupid as well. It's almost the same package that makes us stupid and wise, capable of both.
That came up in ours. We that razor edge of what you do with wisdom, and how language plays a role or not in that. And in a sense, just before, when people were saying things, I was thinking about how maybe it was human hubris to name ourselves wise, use the word wisdom, that actually threw us beyond the realm of wisdom. It's kind of the irony of that we suddenly declared ourselves Homo sapiens, the thinking, wise animal that threw us outside of the reach of wisdom. And those razor edges of how you use language, how you use knowledge.
So, Alina, what could we call the new human that would head to, or anyone that would be the human that seeks wisdom rather than Homo sapiens?
How do you say learning in Latin?
I don't know.
The
human that seeks. Homo, I don't know. I haven't done Latin,
This seems to be a good time to bring in the other thing that came up in our game, the other objection we had to the name, a wise world. God forbid we ever live in a world that deems itself to be wise, right? Because if once you think yourself wise, well, for sure, you've lost track of your wisdom, right?
Yes.
So, rather than seeking to live in a wise world, what we should be hoping for is that we're living in a bit of a wiser world today than it was yesterday, right? And that we are oriented in the direction of increasing wisdom, and letting go of the notion of ever being wise, like Niels was saying before. That's a big barrier to wisdom, is the desire to attain it, right?
It's unwise to call yourself wise.
It seems that way.
But
you're not calling yourself wiser, you are actually wiser.
Yeah, but if to be wise is to call yourself wise, that is foolish. To seek wisdom is to admit your own ignorance.
Correct.
Which is then...
No, to seek wisdom is I don't know, there's an arrogance to it as well, right? Wanting to be more wise. There's something egoic here as well. Why do you wish to be wiser? Why do you wish to be wiser? For what reason?
Because life is shite, and we want to be less shite.
Yeah.
It's avoidance. It's the avoidance of pain.
To get out of the bullshit, you've got to want to get out of the bullshit. It's shit in the bullshit.
Yeah. It's not arrogance.
Yeah.
It's pain avoidance. It's
the whole self-improvement.
It's insecurity and weakness. It's insecurity and weakness,
We've been there, right, with the reframing of the past. We've been there in the second or third turn.
Yeah.
That was like, we need to reframe the past. So is there actually, that was the question, is there actually wisdom? If we need to collectively understand more of the world and collectively understand the pain that we had in the past and reframe it, and then the past is not so painful anymore because we project a different future because we reframed the past. And that being the action of being wise, to understand the past in a different way, and then to be able to perceive the now in a different way, and therefore there will be a different future because the perception has changed. But we need to do this collectively and not in an individual kind of way.
There's definitely something about framing.
Yeah, Alina.
Like you say, Kar. Yeah, 100. Yeah,
wisdom is the reframing history in a way that you wish to, I guess, in a way, in order to create the future that you want. Something like that. I really like that. I really like that.
Although your critique of that being a bit arrogant, depending on how you read what
the desire for self-improvement in general, I think, has an arrogant and egoic element to it. Let's put it that way.
Or it can. It might not need to.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes.
Which part of it, or which part of you is it that wishes to improve itself?
Maybe the part that's, like I say, maybe it's the part that's in pain.
Yeah, that's where we went from, right?
Arrogance in the scale of, I don't remember the name, or any kind of like looking down, maybe. It's like the first step after courage, like downwards into the kind of the abyss of negative thing. I will share I will find the link. So it's like the first step of not acceptance, but there could be a different kind of acceptance when there's like, if I'm afraid of something which can cause me something, I could go with the courage towards it, or I could like move away and saying, oh, it's insignificant, I don't care, or it's like, oh, it's bad. And so it could be that in both cases, in arrogance and in courage, there is a recognition of, this is bad for me, I don't want it, it's disgusting, it's scary, it's unwanted, it's uncultured, it's whatever. And there is this wiser choice to realize that, well, if it is there is a reason for it, and I do not need to dismiss it arrogantly, but I can engage with courage with it and see what it is. Like, it's seeking, it's perceiving it, rather than labeling it and putting there. So when we are seeking an improvement, we could look into the underlying intention. Am I improving in order to distance myself from something that I'm judging as bad, or am I accepting it as bad and still wanting to improve upon it? So in a way that I kind of integrate, when I transcend, as in a sense of Ken Wilber, I'm going an extra step, I'm including it and yet going beyond it. So I'm not saying that it is good enough and I'm not accepting it and just staying with it. You know, a bear is attacking me and I'm just gonna stay with it. Maybe I'm fighting, maybe I'm running away, but I'm somehow accepting it and yet not judging it as just, yeah, I don't want that.
Also, I want to touch upon what me and Cristiano talked about. We talked about the shrines and the temples and the sanctuaries of wisdom that are not present, and we're not even having the conversation today. So like we have our temples of consumerists, the shopping malls, and we have our temples of money, the banking temples in every city. But there's why isn't the tallest building in every city a shrine of wisdom? Like, and I think like the wisdom is the built-in process of being human. It's why we're here today. Without the process and the wisdom at all, we wouldn't have learned anything throughout the eons, and we'd still be in the jungle or wherever we were before. So there's definitely a process of wisdom that's taken us so far, but there's no awareness and conversation, and everyone doesn't talk about wisdom every day. Every human doesn't focus on their wisdom seeking. What have I learned today? And that's something me and my colleagues and some friends are a part of a project in Trondheim called Learning Society that very much explore this on a city or region level. How can we create what we call a learning society that actually want to understand itself and all the citizens within this region or part? And that's a very interesting experiment. That's free processes called Listen, Link, and Learn. So my colleague Bartola can explain it much better. I see if I can get him into the Glassbead game and we can talk about it or something. Yeah.
Niels, who's left?
But we also talked about this. This is our
Yeah.
modern shrine of wisdom. If I don't know if you can see what it is.
What's that?
Oh yeah, the TV.
Yeah, because throughout the eons, every story contained grains of wisdom.
Yeah.
But where is and everyone today thinks the stories is about entertainment, and it's a funny word in itself. But there's supposed to be grains of wisdom in every. If you binge watch Netflix, you should supposedly
You will.
much wiser at the end of the day. But are we really?
This thing about learning life, like I'm an educator. It's kind of what I've done all my life in different ways, you know, in my adult life anyway. So this idea of lifelong learning and learning being a thing that we do until we die, I very, very much resonate with. But I've come to recently, I've been butting up against that as an idea. And I'm just wondering, just a question, just like, is there ever a time to say, actually, I know enough now. I don't need, which is perhaps linking back to what Erik was saying about the arrogance of needing to constantly grow. Like at some point, even if it's just for short periods of time in life, you know, maybe a year or a few months, we need to like accept and just be what we are, rather than constantly like checking, oh no, I don't know about that, and I don't know about that, and I don't know about that. And there's a wisdom in sitting with rather than needing more.
But perhaps but that in itself is wisdom, isn't it? Perhaps what you're talking about, this sense of being on a narrative path where we must be gaining and progressing, perhaps that in itself is not a wise concept. Perhaps the wise concept, it might have narrative as part of our lives, but the sitting with, or the being, or the celebrating, I mean, you're not achieving anything when you watch a beautiful piece of sea or a sunset. There's not an achievement or a doing or a narrative. There's just, or a meditation. There's just a being. So here again, we're playing. The words perhaps are not quite sufficient.
Yeah.
So one example of that constant seeking would be like a wish for immortality, and the wiser thing might be to realize that we are mortal and accept that, and have that enoughness in there. Some kind of satiation, like the one we have when we get enough food and we say, well, it's enough, I don't need to consume more for that moment.
Neil said that wisdom was inextricably linked with humility, and if you lost one, you lost the other.
I guess the humility would imply acknowledging one's certain qualities. So, for example, limitation, of power, of other aspects. It's a wise way of considering one's own position.
I also think the reason why we're here tonight and we can't stop talking about this, like, what is it that drives us here to come here every Monday to do this together? Like, there's something innate in us that like really seeks this experience. It's not in everyone, but there is in enough of us to do this. And
I think part of what's happening, Michael, it's not just the wisdom, but there's a collective intelligence that is very delightful and appealing.
Comforting.
But I'm really tired.
I think part of the reason I like it.
Sounds like you're satiated with the conversation.
Very tired.
Part of the reason I'm here is because it's nice to be able to just say what comes up and that be accepted and valid and okay. Not needing to speak in perfect sentences all the time, not needing to say the right thing, just like, this is what I've got, like, this is it, and this is what's coming up, and I'm going to say that. And that freedom, it's very emancipatory. That's why I like it, I think. and to witness other people in that state as well. It's the two-way thing. It's seeing other people in their freedom, and it's expressing my own.
Sounds like on one part there's belonging, yet with this possibility of being free. So individuality and collectiveness in balance. And in Peterson's terms, also with order, with boundedness, there is space for creativity and openness, which does not lead too much into chaos. So maintaining the freedom, but not doing too much of it.
Yeah.
So I'm really tired. I'm actually host. I'm very happy to hand it over to somebody, and you can continue chatting. But if I just go and shut the screen, everybody gets chucked out. So would you like to stay on? I'll hand it on
Hand it
to
over to
you.
Carl. I'm going to go as well, so hand it over to Carl.
Carl?
I'll be
I need
leaving as well.
I need to get going as well, actually.
Okay.
I want to stay.
Michael and Rolandus.
Michael's always the last. He's always the last to leave.
No,
He's that guy in the pub you can't get rid of at the end of the night. Come on, we want to go home. Fuck off.
Let's be wise.
Last man standing.
It over.
Michael and Rolandus, I can give one of you.
Just give it to Michael.
I'll give it to Michael, okay, and then basically you guys can chat a little bit more.
Yes.
And the rest of us could go to bed.
Very nice to see you all.
Thank you, guys.
I'm going to do a Facebook Live after this, so I can share this with you tomorrow. So I'm going to continue on this subject.
Okay.
Thank you for an awesome game, Rolanda.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Excellent.
Good night,
Night.
Jen. Good night,
Ciao,
Jen.
ciao.
Good night, Michael.